Hey Geometry, welcome to 5.3, the section that pretty much reverses everything we talked about regarding parallel lines and sort of like those four big theorems slash one of them was a postulate, right? So I'm going to recap everything we talked about last week off to the side here. The big things to recap were if two lines are parallel, with one of those lines, we call them a transversal intersecting them. You know what? I'm just going to say this. If two lines are parallel, and they're cut by this line right here, remember, we had one, corresponding angles are congruent. They're the same. So if you recall, and I'm going to label these angles with letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And you know what? This is kind of cluttered right now. Sorry about this, guys. I should have thought about this before the video. Here. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I think that's more clear. Yeah, everything's not so cluttered together. Okay, corresponding angles are congruent. So, we're talking about C is congruent to F because of number one. B is congruent to E because those are corresponding spaces right here. So A corresponds to H. Those are congruent because of corresponding angles. D and G are the same. Get it? Part 2. Alternate interior angles. They're also congruent. So that means that the angles inside the two parallel lines, we're talking A, D, F, and D, okay, those are the inside angles. The alternate ones are congruent. So D and F, those would be alternate interior angles which are congruent. A and E would also be alternate interior angles that are congruent. You've also got alternate exterior angles. They're the outside ones. And they're congruent as well. So think of the angles that are outside of the parallel lines. CB, HG. Those are angles that are outside of the lines. Well, what we're saying here with alternate exterior is that B and H, those are alternate exterior angles that match up and are both congruent to one another. So B is the same as H. Just as C, this outside angle, is the same as G over here. C and G are alternate exterior angles. All right, and then the last one. So can you see it on the screen? You sure can. We call these consecutive interior angles. By the way, another name for consecutive interior angles are same side interior angles. Those are congruent. So first of all, we're talking interior, so still ADFE. Those are inside angles. The consecutive ones, A and H, are consecutive. By the way, I'm sorry, they're not congruent. What are special about pairs of consecutive interior angles? They're supplementary. Which means they add up to not 90 degrees, they add up to 180 degrees. So angle A and angle F add up to 180. So the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle F add up to 180 degrees. D and E would also be considered consecutive interior angles. They also add up to 180. So here's what's happening. This entire section, 5.3, is all about taking those initial theorems, if two lines are parallel and you've got this documentation going, congruent, 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 supplementary, we're doing the converse of those statements in 5.3. Do you remember the converse? Converse flips around the conclusion and the hypothesis. So now what you're doing is you're saying, can we make this as our conclusion given pieces of information about these things? So hopefully this makes sense by the end of the video. If not, you've got a few days to figure it out. So, our first set of tasks are to determine whether or not these lines are parallel. And what we're going to do is use these as our potential reasons, the reverse of them. So, I guess what I'm saying here that you got to trust me with is that the converses of these statements are true. So if you've got corresponding angles that are congruent, that means the lines have to be parallel. If the alternate interior angles are congruent, they got to be parallel. If you know that this is true, that the alternate exterior angles are congruent, then your lines are parallel. If these add up to 180, then your lines are parallel. All right, I think I've said too much. Let's get to the actual examples. So, number one, are P and Q parallel? The answer, yes. Now, by the way, guys, if you don't give a reason on the assignment, I'm not going to give you credit for it, because the whole idea is not just guessing. It's not just, hey, maybe yes or no. It's why. Yes, because 130 plus 50 adds up to 180. Yes, because the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Because the consecutive interior angles. Can you guys see that? Kinda. I know you guys don't really like writing longer statements here, but yeah. That's the answer to number one. Yes, because the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. That's why they're parallel. All right, number two. Are these two lines parallel for sure, right? We're not just guessing because they look like they're parallel. Well, angle 70 and angle 70, well, what do those represent in this diagram? Do they represent any one of those four right there? Answer, yes. They're corresponding angles. Upper left of this little quadrant here matches with upper left of this little quadrant right here. They're congruent. So yes, the two lines are parallel. Yes, because the corresponding angles are congruent. That's why they're parallel lines. How about number three? Well, first of all, there doesn't seem to be a relationship that is, identified here or defined by this angle here and that angle there. It's just not listed as one. But here's what we could assume. We could assume that, hey, if it were parallel, then this would have to be 75 degrees. If it were parallel, this would have to be 75 degrees. What's 115 plus 170, or what's 115 plus 75? It's 190. Okay, 190 is not 180. And these two have to add up to 180 degrees. So, what's your answer? No. Those aren't parallel lines because they create a 190 degree straight line, which can't happen. So, they're not parallel. So, hopefully you guys are kind of making sense of how we're using those for theorems / postulates to kind of figure things out here. Number 4. Oh, this is interesting. We've got angle X happening in 2 different spots. So, would you agree that angle X is congruent to itself? Yeah, it is congruent to itself. So the question is, do any of these seem to just right away jump out at you? Look at the placement of the angles for number 4. Now look at our list of reasons over here. Alternate exterior angles. These right here are they're exterior, they're outside the parallel lines, and they're catty corner. This is, yes, they're parallel because the 2 alternate exterior angles are congruent. Since I'll use an abbreviation, alt exterior angles are congruent. Okay, check out number 5. Actually, why don't you do this? Try 5 and 6 on your own. Pause the video. All right, let's see if you're correct. Hey, look, angles across from each other are the same. Vertical angles. But you know what? Vertical angles always occur no matter what. You don't need 2 parallel lines for vertical angles to be correct. See, we don't have anything regarding vertical angles over here. Nope. Okay. So, yeah, it doesn't matter if this line is here or there or anywhere else. These are also, they're going to be congruent. So no, they don't have to be parallel for this to be true. Number 6. Yeah, why would these 2 be congruent? Is there a reason over here that would back up why these 2 are congruent? Corresponding angles. Upper left, lower left, lower left, lower right, upper right congruent to upper right. Corresponding angles are congruent. Therefore, the parallel lines, or the lines must be parallel. So you'd say a resounding yes, since the corresponding angles are congruent. All right, I'm going to stop the video here. You guys might just need a break anyway. I can get this on YouTube so you guys can start with the notes, and then I will make a second video that documents the rest of this note sheet. All right, be on the lookout for part 2.